This film illustrates the fact that many of the guys you see in the angling media are just like you, holding down a job whilst making the most of their fishing. Here we join Dave Magalhaes as the sun is rising. Whilst other anglers are still asleep, Dave is up and about, eager not to miss out on any opportunities. Stalking carp is primarily about observation, looking, searching, being stealthy, recognising the signs that may not always be obvious. Dave is a master of this method, making the seemingly subtle tricks of his trade the difference between catching and blanking. Don't get frustrated staring at those rod tips. Get mobile, get stalking.
What stalking is really, just looking for the fish, creeping up behind them, finding fish feeding, or possibly getting them feeding, lowering a rig in and having them. It's as simple as that really, just finding the fish and fishing for them, as opposed to plotting up in a swim, sitting behind your rods and just waiting. It's different. If you're at a lake and you're obviously fishing like 60, 80 yards out in the pond and there's signs of fish, that they're out there feeding, you're getting bubbles, fish are showing, that's fine, liners. I'm quite happy to sit behind my rods, but a couple of hours, nothing's happened, 4 hours. I haven't got the time to just sit there and wait for the fish to come to me. What do you pay, 25, 30 quid for 24 hours fishing? And to sit there for 24 hours, another blank, it's not for me.
When stalking for carp, you have to keep your eyes open. You can do a circuit of the lake and it can seem fishless. Walk round the next time and the margins could be alive with carp. Make your own opportunities. Trickle bait into carpy looking spots, stay on the move, revisit the baited spots to see if any carp have moved in. And if one has, then you need the skills to stealthily place your bait without spooking it.
Go into the swim you fancied, leave all your gear there, grab a bucket of pellets, boilies, whatever you've got on you, have a little wander around the lake and just trickle some bait in. You might get lucky and catch loads of fish that session, which is brilliant. And you can write off the bait you've used. But if you're sitting there and you're struggling, at least if you've baited a few areas around the lake, then you can say, well, I've got bait working for me around the lake. Skip my rods in for an hour, go and check them. If I stumble across a fish, that's the great thing about stalking. There's a good chance if you stumble across them and you're able to lower a rig in, it's instant. You'll get a bite within 5, 10, 15 minutes, as opposed to, as I say, getting the marker rod out, spodding, putting loads of boilies out. It could be 24, 48 hours before a fish turns up, whereas the stalking's instant. If I turn up and there's a known, prolific swim, like I think any angler, it'd be wrong not to just whack your bucket straight in there and then go for a walk. But to be honest, what I'm doing when I'm walking round, the first thing I'm looking for is fish. You can't catch them if they're not there. So if I can find the fish on the day where they want to be, where they're quite happy being, that's my starting point. Sometimes it will you stumble across them and they're already feeding, they're happy being where they are, so you can almost leg it back, grab a rod, have a go for them. If they're sort of sitting in an area, that's where I'll bait, trickle some pellets in. Pellets are brilliant, and then I wander off and again just looking for fish. If I can't find anything, it comes to something a bit more obvious. Carp love cover, so any sort of overhanging bush, just where they can tuck themselves away, reeds, lily pads. It could be like snags. Carp love snags, especially when the sun's out, or weed beds. So if you can get a nice little weed bed close in with an overhang to the side of it and a set of pads, screams carp. You've got a good chance of carp coming through at some point, and they're the sort of features I'm looking for. Today's a little bit trickier because the water's really, really murky. A lot of day ticket waters can be very murky, so you're almost not looking for the fish, it's signs of fish. So it could be tail patterns, bubbling up. Again, just fish head and shouldering. For some reason, they don't seem to head and shoulder so blatant in the edge. It's more of a subtle roll. But that's what you're looking for, them sort of signs. Just your basic watercraft, almost the same as what you're looking for out in the pond, but close in, so it's a bit more subtle. I generally take something to bait up with, so where I can just keep it subtle and quiet. So like a spoon where you can just reach over, tip the bait in, and like the carp don't know you're there. So I'll just take a bucket of bait and, like I say, something like a spoon or a spod rod. There was a fish just sat in that weed bed, but he's just turned around and swum off. The masters of their own environment, I would know in my house if someone's been there, or if someone's moved anything, you know when something at home isn't right. It's a bit like them, they know the score, they're not silly. Obviously once I've put some bait in and found a few likely spots, I'll go back to my swim and sort my gear out. To be honest, unless I stumble across fish feeding, I'm not in a rush. You know, as I said earlier, that once the bait's out there, it's working for you. So I almost let the bait do the work, let them draw the fish in. And the longer you know, even if the fish come through, clear it out and disappear, because they've had that free feed, they'll come back. You know, they like a free meal. And, you know, they'll certainly come back and look for some more. Yeah, as a general rule, I've got my stalking rod, a net that breaks down, easy to carry about, my mat, and if I'm going for a whole day stalking, you know, if I'm setting out to stalk, I'll take a rucksack with all my bits. Or again, if I stumble across fish, I can just, you know, get my essentials into a rucksack, like a drink, which is mega important, especially in the summer. Everything that you need into a rucksack, and then off and running with my bucket and obviously a mat. You know, you do need to dress carpy, you know, like dull colours like your dark greens, your browns, your camos. They're finicky as they come in anyway, you know, they're always on guard. It's very rare that you find carp totally relaxed in the edge, you know, just happy to be there. You know, big gravel pits in the spring, you can find them like that a lot, but especially your typical day ticket walk where they're pressured, you've got to keep everything as subtle as possible. So avoiding like a bright white t-shirt, you know, like a big Hawaiian shirt just isn't the ticket, you've got to get rid of that. The biggest thing, without a doubt, is you need a pair of polarised sunglasses. There's a couple of fish feeding down here. It's a shame actually because the water's so murky, we can't actually film them feeding. And this is where like the glasses are so important, because you would never ever know there's fish feeding there without these glasses, because all I can see is just where they're rooting about on the bottom, like there's just clouds coming up. That's obviously them feeding. As I say, without the glasses you would never know they're there. Just going to carefully try and lower a rig on top of them. A little bit risky because I can see the bubbles coming up. Where the water's so coloured, I think we might be able to get away with it. And then obviously, you know, you've got to keep quiet. It's no good just bowling into a swim, going straight up to the edge of the lake, looking in the edge, can't see anything, turn around and walk off. Like I remember as a kid, you know, before I kind of knew what stalking was and fish getting the edge, and I used to walk up to the front of a swim, the amount of times I'd just see a bow wave, something would just shoot off. Now I know that was a carp, it was a carp in the edge and I've just spooked it. So you want to kind of avoid all those things, you know, silly little things like avoiding the gravel as you walk into the swim. You'd be amazed how those vibrations travel through the water, you know, they'll know you're there. And obviously not just walking straight up to the front of a swim, try and use the bankside vegetation. So creep up, stand behind a tree, you know, stick your head through the bushes and have a look. If you imagine that there was bankside cover right the way through here, and you've crept up, you can see the fish either bubbling or clouding up. And you creep over, just bear in mind where your shadow is, because if I crept up behind these bushes and then stood up, I don't know if you can see my shadow there, but you could just blow your chances straight away. So it's always worth bearing in mind where the sun is, because when it's on your back, that's when you've got to be most careful. So the way I see it is, if you're stalking and you're watching them, you're learning so much straight away, and you catch a fish, it's a result. I've had quite a few of my big uns close in, certainly within 10 feet of the bank, where I've watched them, and again, you can pick off the rare ones. You know, you can get into them quiet little corners where them rare fish, you know, they keep out the way. You know, they're not looking for them big baited areas out in the middle of the pond. It isn't just small fish tactic. You catch some whackers. So while I'm walking around, you know, I'm obviously looking for fish, but you're learning so much, because I'm obviously watching the fish, watching their behaviour, and that's when you start to pick up little things like, you know, you're watching the fish feed, you're watching two ducks coming over, and you think, oh God, they're going to spook. The ducks get there, and you see them straight away. They're sort of waddling along, all happy, and they just almost like freeze, like, whoa, what's that in the water? And they back up, and then they shoot off. Now, like the first time I used to watch the ducks out in the pond, and they used to do that, you know, every now and then you see them do it, and you just think nothing of it. Whereas after watching them doing that, like, it's amazing. Like now, every time I sit out in the pond, I know there's carp out there. So straight away, it's, you know, that's something that I've picked up from stalking and watching the fish in the edge. Yeah, as well as ruling areas out, you're obviously picking up where they like to be. over at Linear. I've never been to Linear. Don't know anything really about the complex. No, it's got an incredible head of carp. Walked around, found a few, thought, oh mad, could you see the water all coloured up? So straight away it's got my attention. Got up the tree, and I'm watching these fish, and there's quite a few 30-pounders coming through, stopping, having a little feed. And fair play to this other angler, he's turned up, he's obviously making the effort to go around and have a look, camoed up, walked all the way to the edge, hasn't got any glasses on. So I'm watching him, and these fish are coming right across the front of him, stopping, feeding, and he's sort of giving it one of them, having a look, can't see anything. He's turned around, walked off, and I didn't see him again. But that's where like the polarising glasses are so important, because if he'd had them on, you know, I would have known he would have seen it, because he would have been like, well, straight away ducking down, trying to get out the way, you know, trying to not have his silhouette over the lake. But that probably cost him a bite, because I moved off. You know, I ended up having a fish. You know, I had the rig in the water for about 5 minutes. Typical, rattled off, a little 12, 15 pounder. Don't know where it come from, but caught me a fish. You know, and we shot off after that. And if he'd have seen him there, I've no doubt he would have come around into the swim and definitely caught that night. So again, it's really important, probably the most important thing for me, to have some glasses. Really, there's 3 main tactics for me. Obviously, you know, float fishing. The only difference is, again, it all sort of stems from when you're younger and you're fishing like the more commercial waters, you know, waggler fishing for carp, you know, everyone's done it. But the trouble I've found with, you know, the bigger carp is where they're coming through, you know, they're a bit more powerful, so when they kick, you know, there's a bit more commotion, the float's going. I found with the float that you do tend to, for the bigger fish, you know, they're not bites, you know, they're almost like heavy liners. Sort of to combat that, I think it was John Hofgartner. He used to fish something very similar to, well, it was the lift method, I guess. He'd fish the float under the surface. So he'd get a bite, and his bite was the float coming up and laying flat. You know, tench anglers do it, you know, with the lift method. Very effective, and certainly for the bigger carp, you know, I found that to be much more effective at hooking them. The only trouble is, really, you can only use that on primed spots, you know, where you've come through, no fish get in certain areas, put some bait down, and you've got time to plummet, to set the depth with the float a couple of inches below the surface. It's not really one to, you know, stumble across some fish, flick it out, and your float's, you know, 2 foot below the surface. So it's more of a, when you're priming a spot, setting the depth and then coming away. The other one is free lining. Again, it's can be a brilliant method. I mean, I don't actually free line, you know, just from I have a couple of split shot further back, just enough to almost just prick them, and then they bolt. Another very, very, very like underused method. You never see anyone free lining for carp. Only recently, like in the shop, had a guy come in, free line some bread, and caught a 40 pounder as it was going past. You know, it's 41 or 40 pound in ounces, and yeah, brilliant method. But you know, without doubt, the most effective method is, for me, has been like hair rigging, short hair rig, with quite a heavy lead, anything between 2 and 5 ounces, and a small trout pellet. You know, I'm feeding them trout pellets, so I want to fish a trout pellet on the hair. And in terms of obviously hooking them in the mouth, getting a proper hook fight, getting them in, hair rigging's been the one, definitely the number 1 method for me. Obviously, like anything, you know, it takes a bit of practice. You know, you can't just pick up a ball and do 100 kick-ups. You know, you've got to sort of go at it if you know, pretty regular. And same with the stalking. You know, again, as I was saying, where you can, when you lower a rig in, you'd be amazed. You know, carp can hear incredibly well. You know, noise travels through the water brilliantly. So what you've got to be really careful with is when you're lowering a rig in, is that lead, you can feel it. You know, if you lower a rig in so you can feel the lead thump down, and the carp can hear that. So you need to avoid, when you're lowering a rig in, just be really careful to not thump the lead down. And also, don't lower it in amongst them. Try and wait, try and get them to slowly move away, even if it just means flicking a few pellets. You know, the odd 2 mil, 4 mil pellet on their heads. They're almost, when they're feeding, they're almost like, what's that? Like, get off. And they sort of shuffle away a bit, and that's your chance to lower a rig in. You know, the minute they take your hook bait, you know, your rod just lets rip, and obviously, all panic stations, you know, you jump up, hit the rod, the adrenaline just goes through the roof, you know, your heart's really going for it. It's just mental, it's such a rush. And to me, like floater fishing, stalking, 2 best ways to fish, without a doubt. It's like clouding over, it's gone a bit colder, but surprised actually, we still managed to nick one close in. And yeah, really chuffed. Nice autumn colours. Pucker little common. Well chuffed.